Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here at the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I am continuing my build of the Estes Mars Longship. So, motor mounts all dried, it's time to continue on with other things. I'm going to go slightly out of order here because the next step that I want to do is probably going to take a lot of real life time, and I can be doing this kind of piecemeal while pieces dry. So, we started last time dealing with the balsa sheet here. Pretty much every single piece in here I need to glue together to make a composite fin shape. So I'm going to actually start work on that now. And that means, first and foremost, of course, I need to remove the balsa fins from the sheet. So hobby knife here. I'm doing the easy ones first. The ones that are cut with the grain are generally really easy. Sometimes they even pop out all of their own accord, which you really shouldn't rely on that, of course. Do take the time to actually cut them out. Do not try to just punch them out with your hand. I mean, you probably could, but you really shouldn't, if for no other reason than you're taking a good amount of risk in doing that with damaging the fins. And if you take the time to cut it, you're going to get cleaner cuts anyway. You know, the burrs, if you just force them out, they tend to be really, really messy. So don't do that. I am starting with the easiest parts, again, the ones that are directly along the grain, and I'm looking just to cut the burrs. I don't generally take the time to cut the whole way along the line because that's generally not necessary. When you're going against the grain, that tends to be a bit harder. You probably stand a new hobby blade here. This one's a little on the dull side. But, take multiple passes. You do not need to get all of this in one pass. In fact, you're probably better off making multiple passes. When you try to do it all in one, you tend to put more force into the wood than you would really need, and that's when things break or you lodge the hobby knife in your thumb, which I've tried it. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you've already met your deductible for the year, more power to you, I guess, but it wasn't when I did it. I did not enjoy it. So there you go. All right, so this is getting a little rough cutting through. The diagonal ones, the ones that are cut across the grain diagonally, they tend to be the most difficult in my experience, but take your time. Don't force anything. Take a couple passes. And cut through more than once if you need to. Do try to keep your hand not behind, not in the direction that you're cutting to, because again, that's when mishaps tend to occur. I'm also trying my best here to cut in such a fashion where if the blade does slip, I'm not going to be cutting into another fin. You can't always do that, but like in this case, I'm going to be cutting this direction toward this fin, which, I'd prefer not to, but it's better than cutting this way and accidentally chopping that little bit off if you end up having a blade slip. So that would be preferable. Here, you're at least, there's some wood in the way that you would, probably get stopped by before you end up chopping a little sensitive piece off. And, while that is certainly to be avoided, if at all possible, it's something that can be fixed. You can re-glue these things. It's wood, right? And we're going to be gluing stuff together anyway, so you can fix it. It's just, we'll try to avoid it. All right, so I've cut everything on this side of the sheet. I'm going to switch over to the other side, and that was interesting. Try to release the rest of these pieces. All right, the fact that this snapped off, I mean, it's just scrap anyway, so no harm, no foul here. That little bit I seem to have missed entirely cutting through earlier. All right, what else we got? That's nice. And probably, oh, that's basically free too. Remember, the burrs are really the only thing that holds the laser cut pieces together. So if you just cut through the burrs, that's all you really, really need to do to free the pieces for the most part. Ooh, that is really stuck. And, you know, in my experience, if you try to cut more than just the burrs, you're not really going to do yourself any favors. You're not going to get like cleaner pieces, but you are more likely to make mistakes, and we don't want to make mistakes if we can help it. Alright, I'm getting close to completion with a bunch of these. Jeez, this is really thinly cut, so I'm just going to snap some of these off to get them out of the way. It's scrap anyway. I do oftentimes, you know, keep some of the scrap, but to use in, you know, like glue attachment, but that was so thin it wasn't gonna do a whole lot anyway. So this has barely been etched by the laser at all right in here. That's kind of unusual, so I'm gonna have to cut through that. This is a particularly tough piece of the balsa too. Every once in a while you get something like this. Alright, I'm actually gonna flip this over right here. Since this is cut most of the way through, it's actually going to be easier to cut it this way rather than to try to cut it on the other side. And that's pretty good. And then just finishing up here. I think that was enough to release it. Yeah, so this is mostly cut. Again, you could force this loose here, but I'm going to use the knife because using the knife is going to give me a cleaner cut than the jagged bits I would get if I just tried to force it or snap it. And again, if you force it or snap it, it's entirely possible you will break something that you do not want to break. This actually did not get cut as much as your typical laser cut would. I'm not sure why. Again, I would expect this is a fairly tough part of the wood. There's a lot of grain there, but you know, it's also possible it just didn't go through. Alright, so I'm going to stick to this side again. There we go. A couple more pieces. And while this is somewhat time consuming to go through all this to make sure that you're not having any little accidents or anything, it's still a whole lot faster than trying to glue things back together after you've damaged them. So do take the time to do this right. There we go. And what we got? 2 more pieces. Yeah, plenty of scrap just snapping off this left and right. I will certainly give the good people at Estes credit for using the balsa sheet very efficiently here. There's a lot of fin, and they're pretty tightly packed, and there's not much waste. So good work, guys. This, by the way, if you ever scratch build a kit all the way down to the balsa fins, figuring out how you're going to lay out the fins in the balsa is not just a matter of simple geometry either. You do want to make sure that you have the grain of the balsa going in the right direction for the fin, which does matter. It is significantly stronger if you have the grain pointing toward the body of the rocket. And you can build it any old which way, but if you have the grain parallel to the body tube, it's much more likely to snap off in a landing, and that would be less than ideal. Just about, there we go. Just about done here. Run the hobby blade this way too. Felt like there was something still stuck there. I think the last bit is just this side. There we go. A little bit still attached. Again, you could force that out, but use the knife. You get a clean cut. All right. That's all the wood cut out. You know, I think I'm actually going to put off gluing these together, at least for a moment, because that took a surprising amount of time. I think while I have the hobby knife, I'm going to do a little bit of work on the plastic parts of this as well. So, the plastic parts, there are a couple of them. There's this nice big nose cone. There isn't much to do here. I'm going to have to remove this little bit so that it can attach. So we'll do that. Sometimes these are really easy, sometimes they're surprisingly difficult. Do yourself a favor, cut away from yourself. That was an easy one. The back here though, the stuff's going to have to get removed from this. Let's make sure that we're going to remove the exact correct components, go into the instructions and have a look. And actually, I'm going to find where it says specifically, because we do have I'm going to want the bell here, but the question is how much of this is actually going to get cut off. There's got to be in the instructions somewhere where I'm supposed to be chopping. Oh, there it is. So I need to cut 2 parts of this off. Well, I'm going to be doing enough cutting that this warrants having a cut-proof glove. I might not spend the entire do the whole work here on film, but we'll get started. So this part right here is going to get chopped off, and make sure again I'm doing the right thing. Yeah, this part, and I'm also going to cut it right here. So this kind of conic part, so this is going to get chopped, and this doesn't, isn't as precision because this part is going to go inside the rocket. But like, don't cut that if you can help it. So this doesn't need to look as nice, but still try to do a decent job. Take your time. Definitely take multiple passes. Once you get the knife, eventually it'll break through the surface in a spot, and then it tends to go faster. But still, take your time with that. You're much better off. If this takes 15 minutes. Oh well, better to do it in 20 passes than try to do it in 1 and end up needing a little bit of a nice stitch-up job from the good people at Urgent Care. You could do without that. Sometimes there's, you chop through and it's at a particularly weak spot in the plastic. Sometimes it is an incredibly thick spot in the plastic, and it always seems to be kind of a crapshoot. I think, too, after this particular cut, this blade's going to get retired because it's not as sharp as it once was. But I'm at least making progress. You can see I'm getting some of the plastic scored off and a little bit of balsa stuck there. Well, anyway, we'll come back to that and we'll check and see how this other end is. Maybe this one's a faster one. Again, this is going to be on the outside of the rocket, so do take your time with this. By the way, I have definitely used a rotary tool to cut through this kind of stuff on occasion. I'm using a hobby knife though, and that's not just because the tool is in the basement and I'm up here. I don't really love using the rotary tool for this kind of work. I don't think it is as accurate as using a hobby knife blade. So, you know, you're better off being a little bit more accurate. That cut actually didn't get as straight as it could. There we go. At least I got through part of it. You're better off using a hobby knife, I think, because the Dremel, you know, if you're using a rotary tool, it does tend to melt through the plastic. You know, the heat of the tool's cutting does tend to distort the plastic. All right, so I'm through. I'm just going to be really careful about how I cut here because I want it to be straight if I can help it. And, you know, when you're getting to this point, if you push too hard, you could end up cutting very much not straight. So take your time. And there's also usually a seam that is a harder part to cut through, which I think I just reached. So once you get most of the way through, you can usually kind of peel it off, or at least encourage it to peel off. I'm to that seam in the construction, so I'm going to try to chop through it rather than peel it, because it could break. I don't want that. But again, take your time. There we go. All right, so this is, it's cut. It's a little ratty. I'm going to just take the knife and kind of etch off anything that is, it's thicker here, so I'm going to just very carefully shave off a little bit of the excess. So I want this to be a pretty smooth looking engine bell. And that's better. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, and this makes a horrible sound, sorry, I'm going to sand it. Okay. And that is good enough. All right, so I'm going to finish cutting that off. You don't need to watch that, it's not that interesting. I'm also going to take the time to sand the burrs off these. No, I'll wait until the next video to do that. Might as well see that. Hobby knife blade no needs to go. All right, so thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next part. We'll work on the pin construction. See you then.